Welcome to Calm Your Crazy for This Crazy Life. I'm Kiana Lambert, and today I'm going to be talking about how we create reality with our higher selves. So I've been teaching how this all works on social media, and it's hard to, really piece everything together because you've only got somebody's attention for 3 minutes here or 60 seconds there, depending on the platform that you use. And even if you do long form content and put it on YouTube, it's hard to kind of get everything together in one so that people have a cohesive way of going from A to B without getting lost in the middle. And these are really hard concepts. And what I want to say is that it's not for everybody. If there is difficulty understanding it, it's not that there's something wrong. It's just that you are on a journey and you're hearing this frequency, but it's not really coming through yet. And that's okay. You'll get there. I teach people to get in contact with themselves because it is through you that you create reality. It's through you and your higher self. And I don't pre-plan these podcasts. I ask myself literally each week, what should this week's podcast be about? And this week, this is what I got. And when you build that relationship with yourself and when you ask yourself things, you will get an answer. And I teach that too in one of my other videos. It's very short, but I teach about just after you do the mirror work and after you start setting signs as feedback so that you can see what you're doing, then you sit there quietly with yourself and you ask the questions that you want to know. So this week, I wasn't sitting quietly because after a while you can do it wherever you are, whatever you're doing. But I asked what this week's podcast should be about. And so this is what I got. I'm a science person. Going through this spiritual awakening has been very difficult for me because my parents were super into the metaphysical stuff and all that. And they both come from, trauma. And trauma disassociates you from your body and helps you see the big picture. And so they were really into it. And I automatically rejected it because they were also abusive and they continued that, generational trauma in their own way. So I rejected it. I was disassociated from my body from childhood trauma, and I went into science. I got my master's degree. I have 3 degrees. I wanted to go to medical school. I was in the medical industry for over a decade. So everything for me needed to have like a grounding and a way to verify it, which is why I always tell myself or ask myself to prove it. Give me something physical or tangible whenever it comes up because I need that. So in thinking about nature, I was thinking about how everything has an opposite. So the yin and the yang is black and white. We always need contrast, right? In order to see the light, we have to have the darkness. In order to see the darkness, there has to be an absence of light. There's a male and then there's a female. In nature, when you look at mitosis, which is the splitting of a cell, you see that there's 2. And I also really enjoyed theology and Greek mythology whenever I was a teenager. And there was a story, and I want to pause here, because everything that stands out to you in your life, it means something. It's a marker. So don't dismiss anything. If it stays in your memory, it's because it's like a nugget to the path that you're on. So let's go back. I enjoy Greek mythology, and there is a story that Zeus was so angry with humans that he sent down his lightning. And I'm paraphrasing here. You can go actually read the actual story if you want to, but he sent down lightning and he split people's souls so that they would have to spend eternity trying to find each other again. And I thought this was so poetic, and I had this fantastical idea of love because all I had growing up to teach me and to feedback and to give me feedback was movies and Disney stories and stuff like that. So I thought about it and I thought, oh, this is so romantic and what a great idea. But then, after coming to the realization that I came to in order to make this podcast, I realized that that was a story depicting the splitting of the mitosis cell, the splitting of our higher and lower selves, not us looking for a romantic partner. And the reason I say that is because people divorce so much. You know, the divorce rate's so high. I never believed in marriage. I never wanted to get married either time, because I felt like it was just a contract, a piece of paper, another way to box me in. And I believed in love, though, and I believed in finding one another. But so many people get divorced that it can't be about a romantic partner. And so many people, and I research and I read and I do a lot of things, but so many people do great things in their lifetime and they still end up feeling broken and alone, or they die of some disease. So for me, I'm like thinking, it can't be about finding anything else but your higher self. Because yogis and the spiritual people that find themselves are completely happy and at peace. It doesn't matter where they are, what they're doing, and I've experienced that. And so I know that what Greeks were talking about was not about finding a romantic partner, but finding yourself and connecting back to yourself. And another reason I say that is because Greeks always told stories to understand the humanity part of themselves. And I learned this in college, you know, when I was taking theology classes, but they always tell stories to learn lessons from their humanity. So piecing that all together, I was like, whoa, what Zeus is talking about and what happens in nature is you getting split from your higher self and then spending the rest of your life trying to get back to it. And that is the game. That's like everything. So I started to think about it, and because it's polarity in this world, right? In this lifetime, there's polarity, meaning there is opposites. It's a world of opposites and black and white. I thought, wow, here we are, like trying to think of consciousness, and they're doing all these studies and quantum physics and everything else. And it's actually really quite simple. You have to have an opposite. Everything else in nature has an opposite. So there's no question for me that there's an opposite of me. If I'm physical, then my opposite is non-physical. My higher self, the other part of me, is non-physical. And it was like an epiphany. It was completely eye-opening. And then I was thinking about other pairs, and I thought about the X and Y chromosome. And that immediately sent me to math. Because this is a math-based system. Math is the universal language. Quantum physics is math. Light fractals are just geometry, which gets broken down into math. You can take any person and break them down into math because you can take their atomic mass. You can take their weight and then you can subdivide it and you can break everything down till somebody is like literally just numbers. And if we live in a simulation, if we live in this quantum physics simulation, then that's just a math-based system. So thinking about X and Y being in our chromosomes, I started thinking about a graph. And when I took, algebra, when we took algebra, or when you take any kind of, and I loved algebra. I mean, an algebraic equation was like my bread and butter because math is always verifiable, right? And I spent my entire life needing proof. And math, you can do backwards and forwards, and you can always check your answer and make sure that you're right. And I never wanted to be wrong because that meant I would get in trouble. So I needed something that I could prove to myself that everything was right. So I started thinking about the X and Y on a graph. And I was thinking about how the graph is just a flat one-dimensional sheet of paper with the X and Y axis on it. But the X and Y axis go to infinity in either direction. And you learn that in math. It's infinity. X goes infinity one way up and down, Y goes infinity left to right, or however you want to put it. You can put X and Y axis however you want it, because you can flip the table and then X is on the Y axis. So it can be changed, in other words. So I started thinking, okay, that's very cool, because it's very obvious that I can correlate that to who we are as human beings in this dimension. It's very flat. We know we can't go up into another dimension. We can look down at ants and they're in their own dimension and they can't perceive us, but we can perceive them. And so I started looking up what X and Y, because X and Y also, I correlated it to how X and Y in an algebraic equation are just variables that have no value, meaning they don't have like a number value to them, because you, when you're doing the algebraic equation, have to assign values to X and Y in order to get an outcome in that equation. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, I'm already teaching we're creating reality. I've seen it, I've had feedback, and this is how we're doing it, because this is a math-based system. So when you break it down into the math equation, we're assigning variables to this quantum system and changing our reality with the equation. And so I started looking up X and Y in the algebraic equations online. And then I was thinking about atom particles. And when you take chemistry, it breaks down the way that molecules form together in a 3D way. And so you do have this vertical axis that goes up and down in addition to the X and Y axis, which is flat. And I saw it. There is a Z, and I just completely forgot about the Z. I was just thinking X and Y, right? Because I was relating X and Y chromosomes to humans. And then I found the Z. And the Z makes the entire graph become a 3D graph because it's vertical and it goes up and down. And I thought to myself, okay, we're creating reality. This is a math-based system. So Z has got to be your higher self. I mean, it gives me chills. And when you look at a human, when they teach you anatomy and physiology, which I took in college, you have to name the parts of the planes of the body. So it's a diagram of a human with a midsection that is quartered off, and then there's a section of the front half of the body and the back half of the body, and it uses X, Y, and Z to separate those planes on the human body. So I was like, oh, this is more confirmation, because the first thing that came up was a human body with the Z being the transverse part of it, and the XYZ the XYZ was the transverse part of it, which is the flat part separating the midsection, and then the Z was the human standing up and it being separated from front and back sections. This is also the same structure, the X, Y, and Z, that atoms attach to. So when you're building atoms in chemistry, they attach to the graph in this way when you're building a 3D or 5D model. So it all correlates together. And I know that reality and everything else is just a subset of each other. It's like a multiple of something else. The universe is a multiple of you as the human. And you can see very clearly, like even if you read theology and you map it all together, that the universe is inside of us. And through my experience, I know that I'm creating reality. So when I started looking at the X, Y, and Z, and I put it into algebra, the X, Y, and Z is a linear equation. And I didn't remember that. I just, put it in the Google, and it came up as a linear equation. And it just blew my mind even more, because we experience things linearly. Linear means that it travels in one direction. So we experience time linearly. We experience seasons. We experience change. We experience all of it linearly. And they've done experiments with a man who volunteered to do this, and he did it a couple of times, and he died really young, which is beside the point, but it's a little marker I put myself for later. But he would go into the darkness, and he went into the darkness. I think the longest one he did was for 7 months. And in the darkness, he lost all track of time. He went through a period where he thought he was insane and he was hearing things. And then he lost all track of time and he started sleeping for over 30 hours. And he would wake up for about 12 and he would eat, and then he would go back to sleep. He lost all concept of time because he didn't have anything visually to correlate it to. So we experience time through our vision, through our eyes, and we experience it linearly because we have the sun that comes up and it goes down. And if we didn't have that, we would lose all track of time. And I theorize that he slept that long because his consciousness was like, there's nothing to do here, so peace out, I'm doing something else. Now, the reason that I find this so incredibly mind-blowing is that if I know we create reality, and then now I know, like for me it's truth, fact, that there's a higher self and a myself, a non-physical me that can see everything, be everything, all everywhere at once, then that is how I'm creating reality linearly. And when I break down reality into math, it's an X and a Y and a Z that represent the human who's making it, the soul who's making it together. And we're doing this through our nervous system. And I know it's the nervous system because I am aware of the physical sensations in my body. And that's how I knew I was dysregulated and in fight or flight, because nothing was happening. I was very aware of my surroundings, but my body felt like it was terrified. And I didn't have any association with it because I wasn't really terrified. It's called meta-awareness, when you're aware of what you're aware of. And so I started playing with my nervous system, started reading more about it, learning more about it, looking at theology and esoteric texts about it, and everything points to the nervous system. Disease, autoimmune disease, nervous system. Like if you gave me any single disease, I could link it back to the nervous system because that's what I've already done. So everything is very obviously the nervous system. There are articles coming out of studies they've done about how the brain gets hijacked and that you're not yourself. And I've experienced this as well, where I didn't feel like I was in control and I was like watching myself doing something that I would never normally do. And I was like, okay, you get hijacked. If you are not in control, your system gets hijacked. So esoteric texts talk about how the spinal cord is the connection between consciousness and your physical body. And a lot of them say that. And what I do when I do research is look for the common denominators, because in math, the truth is always the lowest common denominator, or the common denominators. When I did police and fire dispatch, you have to get like a description of the person, and they teach you that the truth is always, or most likely, the common denominators of what everybody sees. So when you go through testing and when you go through tests that you have to do in order to get released from training, you have to be able to pick out those common denominators quickly. So the common denominators in the esoteric texts, as far as where your link is through your consciousness, is through your brain and spinal cord. That's the common denominator. The common denominator between the esoteric stuff and the human body stuff is the nervous system. So then it all points back to the nervous system. So I started thinking about the nervous system and then also how we create reality, and then the math portion of it, which is very obviously an XYZ linear system. I mean, I laugh because it's so freaking obvious. Like, It's a quantum world. It's an XYZ, which needs you to assign as the person doing the algebraic equation variables. It can be any variables to it. And then you've got your equation, which is how we create reality. I mean, literally, that is what we're doing. That's how we do it. And it's so simple. And people get really stuck and zoomed in on like certain things in science. But if you zoom out and you just look for the lowest common denominator, there it is. We create a linear system with X, Y, and Z because X and Y are in our chromosomes and we don't have a Z because the Z is non-physical, which is our higher self. Anyway, thinking this way does just require a lot of brain power. Believe me, it's hard to be myself some days. But anyway, it all links back to the nervous system. And I thought, okay, well, if we create reality, it all leads back to our nervous system. And the XYZ is the variables that are needed to create the reality equation. Then where are we getting our XYZ from? Well, the Z is got to be your partner. And I related that to whenever I was in a leadership conference and we had to take turns blindfolding our partners and then leading us through the forest, leading ourselves through the forest. So my partner was blindfolded and I had to lead her or him, I don't remember who it was, and we had to guide them through the forest as they were walking. If there was a tree root or if they had to step over a rock or if they needed to go left or right to stay on the path, you had to give them those instructions. And then vice versa, I would be blindfolding and get instructions from my partner. And if we didn't give the right instructions, there were several people that tripped and fell. So I started thinking that's the way that your consciousness works with you, or your higher self, your non-physical self works with you. It tries to give you instructions, but you're blindfolded because you cannot see reality and everything the way it is and where all the chips need to fall, and you can't know what variables to assign it. So your higher self, your non-physical self, is trying to give you guidance. And that guidance goes back through the nervous system. So your nervous system is how you communicate with your higher self. And I was thinking, how? How does it communicate through your nervous system? Well, your body feelings, what you feel in your body, right, wrong, or danger, it all is through your nervous system. So if you're in tune with your body and you're in tune with your instincts, that is your higher self, your non-physical self communicating with you in a physical sense. Now, everybody thinks like in binary terms. No, there's so many. Yes, there's so many different ways for the communication to take place. I'm just merely giving you one way, through the body. And if you can't feel your body, then you are cut off and you don't know what to do and you won't have your instincts. And then I looked at society. What's happening today? It's end stage capitalism. And even in the beginning when it wasn't end stage capitalism, women were restricted to staying at home. And I relate this back to my grandmother, who was forced to stay at home when she wanted to go to art school. She wanted to do a bunch of things, and it made her stressed out and angry and unhappy, and she took it out on the kids. And her husband, my grandfather, who subsequently drank because of it and then caused more trauma. So I can map how all these things work together. Even if it wasn't end stage capitalism at the time, they had other stressors. And when you have stressors, especially now in end stage capitalism where people can't afford to buy food, or they're worried about rent, or having all these different stressors, not to mention the quality of food, the amount of sleep, all of it, all of those tie in together into regulating your body. So, and you can look at oh my God, Andrew Huberman and all these other freaking neurologists and scientists, they're all like telling you their part of the story, which is their research, their observation on the brain. And then you've got other people doing research and their observation on different body systems, and they're all fractured. And you got to put it all together because the body is one homeostasis system. And if you're only fixing one part of it, then that doesn't really help. You got to fix everything together. So society, and the way the game is right now, attacks every single part of it. It attacks your brain, your spinal cord, your food system, your sleep, and you're stressed. So everything is designed to cut you off from your higher self, because that's the nature of the game. That's the hard level. And stress and anxiety put compression on you in order to grow. And people like want to blame politics or whatever else. It doesn't matter. None of that is real. It's just ones and zeros. It's just more different levels of the game that you experience physically. And when you can detach from all that, you can see how none of it is real. None of it matters. It's all just a way for the game to make pressure on your system, on your human system, so that you have to either overcome it, get control of yourself and your mind and your body, or it compresses into your body. And your body holds everything until it fractures and it can't anymore. Because too much stress will fracture your body and then fracture your mind, and that's why you have people that end up where they end up. That's why you have people who end up with addiction, and they end up doing harmful things to other people in society. So that's the level of the game that you've got to beat. So to break it all down, the level of the game that you've got to beat is detaching from end-stage capitalism and the stressors. You're going to have them anyway. And you need to connect back to your source. Because once you connect back to your source, then nothing seems impossible. And when nothing seems impossible, then you literally feel like you can do anything. And fear is like the basics. Fear is the base of all this, right? Anxiety and stress come from fear of not being able to do something. When you are connected to your source, when you are connected to your higher consciousness, you don't have fear anymore. Because you have love, you are sure of yourself, and you are connected to everything. Like when you connect to yourself, you are connected to everything, and it feels amazing. And there's nothing that you can't accomplish. Even a setback will be seen as just another piece of the puzzle that you have to integrate. And it really changes your mindset. So people need to get back to themselves. They need to get back to their consciousness. And it gets really more intricate when you break down how to do that, because it involves your body, it involves healing, it involves a lot of different stuff. But that's how you beat the game, is to connect to your source and your higher consciousness. And people do that, in esoteric ways through breath work and taking care of themselves or working out. There's so many different ways that you can connect. You can go out and connect to it in nature and everything. And the reason that you can connect to it in nature is because you don't have all the frequency disruptions that you have when you're around tons of other people. They're emitting their own frequency. These 5G towers or 6G towers are emitting their own frequency. And you're constantly getting bombarded with these unseen things that dysregulate you. So when you go out into nature, everything's quiet. There's none of that stuff out there, so you can connect. But I want to get back to the variables before I end the episode, because this is important. The variables have meaning, not just in showing you that there's your consciousness, which is the Z, the vertical, and then the XY, which is, your physical self. They're variables that need to have meaning. They need to have a value assigned to them. And I don't mean just a numeric value. I mean any value. When you look at a variable, it's a variable, right? You can add any value to it. Your past are all variables. And your past, you could also look at it as ingredients. You can look at variables as ingredients. You can look at X, Y, and Z in a linear equation as ingredients. And your past has a fixed set of variables. You experienced it, you assigned a meaning to it. It is a fixed variable. It is an ingredient that will not change. So you can change the way you look at it, and that changes the variable. But your past is what is creating your present. And when you think about the past and you are afraid, it is because of the past, not because of the future. It is because of something that has happened to you. Those variables go into the linear equation that you create every day of your life, and they create your reality, your present. Because of the way you perceive things, because of the way you feel about things, and the actions you take and the thoughts you have from your experiences, from your variables of your past. So if you think about it in a math equation, or you think about it in the sense of ingredients, the way that you move forward and change your reality is changing the variables, changing the input. If you had a really negative past and you're hurt all the time, that is a set of variables that brings out the equation of seeing everybody as somebody that's going to hurt you, isolating and not being open, and then you experience reality that way. So if you want to change that, you have to change your ingredients. You have to change your variables. And it starts with the mindset. So my past is very, very dark. But if I look at it from the mindset of everything was meant to happen to me the way that it happened to me, so that I could be here right now, I could have the kids that I have, and I could have the love that I experience for myself, then it was all worth it. If you change one variable of your past, it would change you. And you can change you at any time. So when you reframe the mindset, the variables change, the equation change, your reality changes, period. End of story. That's what happened for me. And it's concrete for me. And I feel like it's concrete for everybody else that is on this frequency. Believe me, there are a lot of people that are like, no, they don't understand a word of it, and that's fine. That's why I have a video where it talks about people who don't understand spirituality. When you talk, it's just like, because that's what it is to them. And if that's okay, if you're listening to this and it doesn't make sense, you're already on the path if you're listening to this, and it will make sense soon. You can command yourself to help it make sense. I just really caution people when they do that, because you can go insane. If your body's not healed and it doesn't have the capacity to hold what you are pulling in, then it will fracture your mind. And you will dissociate from life because it feels so good to be attached to yourself. You won't want to eat, sleeping becomes irrelevant, and you just go nuts. I mean, thankfully, I'm like aware of some of that happened to me, and I was able to pull myself back in and restart. And I've had to restart a couple of times. Because honestly, it makes you feel like you don't even want to be here. When you attach to your source, oh my God, it's like nothing matters. You don't want to be here. You just want to go home. And a lot of people experience that anyway because of sadness. But when you feel the source attachment, you just, that's it. That's why Buddha left his wife and went to go sit under a tree, because it doesn't matter where you are. It feels so good to be attached to yourself. You don't care what you're doing. There's no society that judgment doesn't even matter. So you just are happy and you go, go, go. But you have to come back and be human and live your life and do the things that you want to do and have the balance between owning your spirituality and being connected to yourself and then doing something in this life. And I'll tell you right now, there is no inherent meaning or purpose. You have to give it that purpose. And I've gone through this many times, and what they call the dark night of the soul, which is just you facing the negative side of this entire equation. You have to provide meaning. You have to be the one that goes out there and does the things, because that's what creates your equation. So basically what I'm saying is that to change your life, you have to change the way you look at things, and you have to go out and experience new things, because that is new variables for your consciousness and yourself to create that equation of your reality. And if you are not attached to your consciousness and you are not attached to your source, then you are creating reality based on the past variables that are programmed from your experiences, and therefore you keep recreating the same thing that you're living in over and over and over again. And for a lot of people, that's fine. And I call them NPCs because they're fine. They just recreate it. They have no angst. They're fine. They're totally fine just recreating over and over again. And those are fixed, stable structures in society. And they're not real. But if you don't like your life, you don't like where you are, and you are in a stressed environment, you need to connect to your source. And it begins with you, and it begins with things that you have inside, and it begins with regulating your body. And you can do all the physical things, or you can sit there and realize that you are everything. You are the fear in your mind, you are the anxiety, you are the stress, and you are the one that is creating it with your reality. And a lot of people don't like this. Honestly, in the beginning, it made me mad at first too, because then there's no one else to blame but you. And that makes me mad because I don't want to feel the blame. I don't want to know that I was doing this unconsciously and now it's my responsibility to change it. It's infuriating. I want to be like, no, this happened to me in my story and this is why I'm like this. Well, that's me assigning a value to every single variable in my linear equation. And therefore my outcome is going to be the same. My reality is going to be the same. So if you can wrap your mind around, you are creating your circumstances you are living in. You are creating your fear. You are creating your anxiety. And you are creating your stress. Then you can ask yourself why. And that's what I do with myself. If I feel the anxiety and the stress in my body, I start to ask myself why. Why is this coming up? And it usually comes up whenever I'm doing social media stuff or whenever I'm doing stuff that requires me to be vulnerable and me to be seen, because that was not safety whenever I was growing up. That's a fixed variable and I catch it. Do you see how I did that? That's a fixed variable. When I ask myself why am I feeling this when I'm doing social media, then it comes back to, oh, because I'm being vulnerable. And what happened when you were being vulnerable and telling the truth when you were little? Oh, you got in trouble. That is a fixed variable. People call it wounds or whatever. But that variable has a fixed meaning and it's in my linear equation. So once I see it, I'm like, oh, I can choose that's no longer relevant. And everyone is a reflection of me. So everything that comes up is just something that reflects back to me my old variables that have a fixed value. And then it's up to me to stop it and choose differently. And people ask, oh, how did you lose the weight? How did you do this? How did you do that? Well, getting in touch with myself and becoming the architect of my own life. And knowing that I have the power over myself. And that's what creates reality. And then watching people assign their power or give meaning to their old stories or to what's happening in their life instead of taking the responsibility. And saying taking the responsibility sounds like your parent, right? And it's not even happy. You know, nobody wants to do that. But taking responsibility is literally just saying, okay, I'm the one that's assigning these anxieties to myself. I'm the one that's giving myself this fear. And you can look at it a different way. Nobody else is around you. These are hormones in your body. And you're not your hormones. You're not your body. And you can say, well, I'm doing this because that's what happened to me in the past. Or I'm doing this because maybe you don't even know why you're doing it. But if you need to know why you're doing it, you can sit there and ask yourself why you're doing it, and you'll get an answer if you're listening. And then if you know why you're doing it, you can see how it's an old variable and it's you that just needs to change your mindset around it, and you can choose to feel differently at any time. There's a neurologist that talks about how you can make the choice to feel good. And that bad thoughts or negative thoughts are just conditioned things that if you think of them long enough, they create neural pathways in your brain. And when you have a thought, it's just electrical signals, and it just chooses a path of least resistance, which is all the neural connections that you've already made thinking this bad thought. And if you think about how you need to make new thoughts, look up a neuron reaching out for connection to make a new neural pathway. It is physically pushing itself to grow and reaching out to make another neural pathway. So if you want to think of it in the biology terms, just as far as your thoughts go and how thoughts create conditions in your body with hormones, your brain and your body run on entire electrical circuits. You've got electricity running through your body, and it powers your battery, it powers everything. So if you have a negative thought, or if you have a negative life and you have negative variables or whatever, that's your reality. And there's nothing that's wrong with you. That's how it happened. And your electricity is going to take the path of least resistance, because that's how electricity works. Every single house has a grounding wire, because the electricity will just go throughout the house. It just runs, and then it needs to go through the grounding wire into the ground, or else you could get electrocuted by your own house. Your thoughts are not you. It's electricity taking the path of least resistance because you've thought those things so many times, the neural connections are there. Building new neural connections requires the positive thoughts. That's why you have to keep doing it over and over and over again. It isn't false positives. It isn't spiritual bypassing. It's literally physiology. You've got your neurons in your brain that have to reach out and make new connections. It takes time. Some people, it goes faster. But with repetition and consistency, you build new neural pathways, and you stop thinking with the old, because those neural pathways aren't used anymore, and the path of least resistance becomes the positive. When you have positive thoughts, it creates positive hormones in your body, and you feel good. When you feel good, it's easier to connect to your source. Your perception of life becomes different. Your variables, your ingredients, and your linear equation, or whatever soup you're making for your life, become easier, because it's just your brain and the path of least resistance. So I can teach this a variety of different ways. If somebody needs to have it taught to them in the biology sense with their body, perfect, we can go that way. If you need to have it taught spiritually or esoterically, perfect, we can go that way. If you need to have it related to math, perfect, we can go that way. They're all the same. The point is, you create your reality, your world, your mind, your anxieties, your fears, and everything. If you let your external environment dictate who you are, then you will become irritable, anxiety, all of that. And it's just a round and round and round and round mirror where you keep recreating it. People are like, no, that is fixed, that job is fixed, my life is fixed, I am just responding to my environment. Okay. You create your reality and you create your truth, no matter how you slice it. So if those are the rules that you set in place, you're assigning value to those variables, you're assigning those ingredients, and that is your outcome. Period. End of story. I know this was a lot, and it's a very freaking long episode, I get it. But it is how it works, and I just related it to you by going back and forth between theology and science and biology and math. But if you can track that, then you got some meta-awareness, big time. And if you understood everything that I said, then baby, you're a player in the game. And you can start manipulating reality. And you can start changing things. It's really actually fucking cool. And people think you're crazy, and that's okay. You just tell them it's your new religion. And then they can't do shit about it. Because you're not harming yourself and you're not harming other people. You are just believing in something new. So, I hope you have a happy New Year's, and I hope that this was instructional for you, and have a good rest of the week. I'll talk to you next week. I don't know what it's going to be about, but we'll sure as fuck figure it out, huh? Love you, mean it. Bye.